Hey, doctoral candidates, it's Dr. Kane Ellis from Defeat Your Dissertation. And today I want to talk about why the literature review is so difficult and what it is that you can do to overcome those struggles. So, first, let's start talking about what the literature review is and is not. Okay? Your literature review is not everything and anything that's ever been written tangentially connected to, possibly relevant to your topic. It also is not an annotated bibliography. You're not just collecting resources and writing up a few sentences on each one. Your literature review really is supposed to be a cohesive, comparative analysis of the existing research that directly connects to your research topics. So, how is it that you go about writing one of those? Well, honestly, it's really not as hard as it may appear at first. The first step is making sure that you're really organized in your approach. And so, why is organization so important when you're writing a dissertation? Because a dissertation is huge. This is going to be the largest piece of academic writing and academic research that you or anyone in school is going to do. So it's going to be different than the 15 to 30 page papers that you were writing in graduate school. Maybe you worked on some type of research project previously, or maybe you contributed to some research articles with a professor at some point, but those really don't stand in the same light as your dissertation. So writing the literature review for a dissertation can seem super overwhelming, that you are going to have a lot of resources that you need to sift through. You are going to have a lot of unnecessary research articles and books that you've gathered that you don't end up using. And that's part of the battle, is knowing which ones to throw away. So first, let's start with knowing your topics and your subtopics. So it's important to know what your big topics are and what your minor topics are. That if you've had your research problems or your research questions approved already by your advisor, then you're probably in a good spot to be able to start gathering the research that you need to really construct your literature review. If you're not quite there yet, then I would suggest that you check out some of my resources and videos on how to develop a research topic and how to turn those into research questions or problems, depending on the type of methodology that you think you're going to develop. So let's jump back into the literature review. So let's say that you have your research topics and you have your research questions or problems already developed. That means that you know generally what your big topics are going to be, and then you also know what specifically you're looking for. So when I was writing my dissertation, I wrote about novice teachers, specifically first-year teachers, and how they came out of their teacher prep programs and socialized into the school fabric, and how that influenced the types of relationships and the types of perceptions that they had of parents. So I had all these broad topics, right? If I wrote everything up that was out there on new teachers, if I wrote up everything out there that was on parental involvement, I would still be writing. And I graduated in 2011 with my doctorate from Rutgers. So I don't suggest trying to gather every single little thing. And so what I did was I looked at my research questions and realized that I was really just talking about first year teachers. I was really talking about their mentors and how it is that they were influenced by other teachers, that not how they're influenced by other factors in education, whether it was the news or public policy or the economy. I was really looking at how mentoring teachers or older teachers were influencing, what type of conversations they were having about parents, and how that directly influenced the new teachers and their perceptions of parents. So I knew I had a narrow search, right? I was only going to be looking at conversations and dialogue that were happening inside of the school between older teachers and these new teachers, whether it was through the formal or informal processes around mentoring or induction at the schools. And I narrowed it down to public schools. I wasn't going to look at private schools or religious schools. I was only going to be working in public schools. So I kept on narrowing and narrowing down my research questions and topics until I was able to get it to the point where it was going to be manageable and that there wasn't going to be thousands and thousands and thousands of articles out there that I was going to have to sift through in order to support my research. And so what I would suggest to you right now is to write down what your big topics are, right? My big topics were parental involvement, new teachers, and mentoring, as well as my theory, which was social learning theory and critical race theory. So those were my big broad topics. And then the next thing you have to do is you have to write down those specifics. Like I was just saying, that I was looking about conversations inside of the school. I was looking about perceptions of parents from the veteran teachers as well as from the novice teachers, and seeing what was out there in the research already on that. That everything else I threw away. I didn't need anything else because I wasn't researching anything else. And that's what you have to keep in mind. What is it that you're researching and what is it that you're not researching? And then start breaking it down. And then the other main thing that you want to consider when you're doing a literature review is it getting repetitive? So are you pulling research articles that the same person's being cited over and over and over, and you're citing person B when you really only need to cite person A because they're the one that really is the primary source of that information? So be mindful of that as you go through, that you want to look at who your major researchers are and your minor researchers. Your major researchers are the ones that are going to correlate back with your major areas or your broad topics, and your minor authors are going to be the ones that probably correlate with the small topics or your more specific research questions. That you don't want to be using small little voices and small little references in your paper on your big topics. You just want the big players out there for your big topics, and then you can use the smaller people who have more focused research that really relates directly to the direction that your research is heading. So don't get lost in having to cite 27 people who are all saying exactly the same thing, that really the same two people were the ones who developed that idea to begin with. Then when you're actually writing your literature review, it's hard to keep organized and it's hard to keep track of. And so I teach my students in my program, Defeat Your Dissertation, how to take notes effectively. And how you were taking notes in grad school and undergrad is probably great for papers of that length, but it's not going to sustain you for a research paper of this length. And so what is it that you can do to improve your note taking? My two tips would be: one, typing up your notes in phrases or quotes, right? Not just taking little facts and little numbers that you're going to have to figure out later, but actually writing it into little phrases and or direct quotes and typing it. And then I would cite the resource after every single line. And what that's going to enable you to do is that's going to enable you to copy and paste those phrases with the citation directly into your research paper, into your dissertation, and then formulate those into sentences without losing the original information. Once I did this, it just shifted my entire momentum. That then I was able to take off running. That I was previously I had been taking notes on paper and on Post-its and in the margins of books, etc. And once I streamlined the process, then my literature review really wasn't overwhelming anymore because I had everything super organized and I was able to streamline it right into my research paper and then right into my references in one fell swoop. So that's the other major thing that you can do to reduce the stress that you have about your literature review. And then finally, my other piece of advice is that you have to remember that you are trying to keep these texts in conversation with one another. They're not, like I said earlier, it's not an annotated bibliography, so you're not separating them out and just writing little notes after each one. You really need to compare and contrast constantly between the different researchers. So if you have a researcher who's saying that mentoring teachers have no effect on novice teachers, and then you have 18 people who are saying the opposite, obviously you need to spend a little time introducing the opposition and then also then supporting why it is that most likely novice teachers are influenced by their mentor teachers. So once you kind of get going in the mindset of this is a comparative analysis, and that this isn't an annotated bibliography, that you'll also start to see some progress. I hope that these tips and strategies that I talked about today in this quick little video got you thinking a little bit more positively about your literature review. And while I didn't get super into depth, I think it gave you enough to really start thinking about ways that you can change your approach to your literature review. I have more strategies and resources on my website, defeatyourdissertation.com, that hopefully you'll be able to access and really start to generate some forward momentum. The fact that you're here today means that you are committed to your dissertation and you want to get it done. And so I wish you luck. I know it's a difficult process because I was there and I remember writing my literature review and feeling really overwhelmed. But once I was able to figure out these strategies, I really felt much more successful, and I really was able then to drive through that chapter with much more ease. Thanks for watching today. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions or anything that you need help with. Good luck.